legends, that's who they are. Each one of them an SNL star. The truly great for Saturday Night Live. Every week we do a deep dive. Let's find out who are the greatest hosts, the ones that the fans love the most.
Yes, welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network for another edition of our countdown of Saturday Night Live's greatest hosts of all time. My name is John Schneider from the SNN. So excited to be with you here as a presentation of LateNighter.com and with some great guests on this Labor Day. Whether you spell it with just an O or an OU, it is Labor Day around North America. So I'm happy that you are hanging out with us tonight to finish up your long weekend and talk about three hosts within the top 10. Wow, we have made it. 7, 8, and 9 are going to be revealed tonight. So this is a huge show, and I want to see your thoughts in the chat as we reveal our host tonight. Joining us once again on this podcast is the great Bill Kenny. Bill, how are you?
John, I'm great. Keep your U's out of our Labor Day, please. Let's not do that. Yeah, it's great to be here on a holiday. Also, as I was saying beforehand, this is my 17th wedding anniversary today. So happy anniversary to my wife. Long and winding road. But yeah, happy to reveal the three we're going to talk about tonight. Cannot believe how close we're getting, John.
It is really crazy. Yeah, we're down to the final 3 weeks of this countdown. So like I said, 7, 8, and 9 coming up tonight. And we have to do this with two amazing guests that are joining us here. So excited to get to hear their thoughts on the countdown for the first time. So two of our greatest patrons are here with us. They're biggest supporters of the podcast. And first up, let's bring in Casey Killingsworth tonight. Casey, how are you?
I'm great, John. It's great to be back. You can probably tell I got a new microphone, new podcasting setup, new computer, and I don't know if you can see, that looks much more professional than I was doing. I figured if I was going to start doing this into SNL's 50th season, if I was going to do any other patron feedback shows this season, I better up my podcasting game, get a better setup. So, yeah, I just want to look more professional for you guys since it's about that time.
Well, I appreciate it. This is the greatest gift is when people come on and they sound amazing. So I appreciate it, Casey. And we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts tonight. We are also very much looking forward to hearing the thoughts of the legendary Ike Moore, who's with us tonight. Ike, how are you?
I'm good, man. I leave for how long? And you got Panic at the Disco inspired theme. What's going on here, John?
That's true. Yes. Yeah. Very Panic at the Disco. I mean, I wanted something that was like summery and fun, pop vibe. So we got that here. We still, even though it's Labor Day and it's sort of like the unofficial end of summer for a lot of people, we still got a few more weeks, I think. So, we're still going to party on with the summer for the next 2 more weeks with this countdown. So great to get to speak to you, Casey and Ike, and looking forward to getting into the list that we are going to continue to reveal tonight. So first up, let me just say Labor Day, this is sort of the turning point in SNL verse of, when we might start to get some news about season 50. So still nothing to report here tonight in case you're not tapped into social media, but maybe later this week we'll hear something, who knows? And if that's the case, we'll try and be live to talk about it. And we'll also, be back next week to discuss everything season 50 as we inch closer to the new season. So I'm looking forward to that. Lots of fun stuff coming up. We also have 2 more shows that are going to be dropping this week. So I will reveal those at the end of the podcast, what's on tap for the rest of the week. But for now, let's get to the list that we have revealed so far. We have 41 names on this list, so I'm very excited to go through them here. Bill, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind to read out the list for me, because I just have to drop out and come back in for a second. So I'm going to put them up on screen for everybody, and Bill will take you through the 41 we have revealed so far.
Yeah, starting at 50, we've got Danny DeVito, John Lithgow, Anne Hathaway, Jack Black, Dana Carvey, Paul Simon, Louis C.K., Lily Tomlin, Jimmy Fallon, and Charles Barkley. Starting at 40, we've got Eric Idle, Amy Poehler, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Josh Brolin, Conan O'Brien, Peyton Manning, Bill Murray, Richard Pryor, Zach Galifianakis, Drew Barrymore. Starting at 30, we've got Larry David, Dwayne Johnson, Maya Rudolph, Pedro Pascal, Elliot Gould, Jim Carrey, Dave Chappelle, Lindsay Lohan, Paul Rudd, Candace Bergen. At 20, we have Will Ferrell, Martin Short, Scarlett Johansson, Ryan Gosling, Kristen Wiig, Buck Henry, Eddie Murphy, Tina Fey. And then last week we revealed 12 through 10, Betty White at 12, John Hamm at 11, and Adam Driver starting off the top 10.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Those are our 41 names we have talked about so far. Adam Driver, the first one in the top 10. So very exciting. Really the greats of the greats here. Bill, how are you feeling as we enter this legendary tier of SNL hosts?
A little trepidation, trying, as we said last week, trying to figure out who's left, kind of having a grasp on the 9 that are left. I know the 3 tonight, obviously, but I don't know who the other 6 are. There's going to be some big names that haven't made it, but overall, pretty good. Betty White, a little bit high, as we talked about last week, as only a one-time host, even though it's an epic classic episode of SNL. But overall, I think we've got a really good list, and the 9 that are coming should be very good as well.
Casey, I know you're a huge study of SNL history. So how do you feel like the listeners have done so far with the 41 we have revealed?
I mean, I feel like they've mostly done a good job. I mean, I feel like some of the there's some one-time hosts and maybe a few 3-time hosts who were a little high. That might be due to recency bias. I mean, well, I'm only going to name one name. I wouldn't have put Pedro Pascal that high myself. Unless he did get to host this past season finale instead of Jake Gyllenhaal. But yeah, overall, there's some good choices made, except I don't want to dig up a dead horse or anything with this comment, but I personally would not have included Louis C.K. on this list, just because I know you had to talk about can you separate the art from the artist with this person, and I personally can't, and that's because I used to be a fan of his, and I know that outside of his SNL episodes we hosted, that was a collaborative effort with SNL staff. But everything else he's done, his stand-up, his FX show, his attempts at filmmaking, was he was notorious for having 100% creative control over all that other stuff he did outside of SNL. He just did SNL to plug. And, that it makes it hard for me to just separate the art from the artist when the art is literally an extension of the artist, a real vague, abstract one at that. And he kind of, doubled down on some things afterwards. But other than that, I have a good feeling about this list. I like it a lot, and having seen where it's going, I like it a lot more. I feel like the list is in a pretty solid place. So let's get Ike's thoughts, and let's move forward.
Ike, let me go over to you then. Let me ask you how you feel about this list so far.
I enjoy the list. I think there's not really a problem with it, even with the more controversial choices. I respect people's opinions on Louis C.K. and Dave Chappelle. I hear all of it. It doesn't bother me at all, their placement on the list. The one thing I do want to say, and this is coming from a wrestling fan, a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson fan, I think he's a little bit too high on this list. And this is coming from someone who loves his 4th episode. In my opinion, his 4th appearance is probably one of my favorite SNLs of all time. I still think of Franchise Viagra and the Bambi sketch and all that. But even I'm looking at that and I'm like, but you got Richard Pryor right there, man. Me personally, I would have switched it. But again, I'm not complaining at all about the list. No.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When we first started this thing, I said that I don't think that, there's a lot of publications that produce top 50 cast member lists. Host lists have been much more, they haven't been done as much. And I think it's interesting to see how people truly feel about it when we start talking about some of the more controversial figures that have made the list. Obviously, people have factored that in, the reason why those, people maybe are not higher than they should be. And yeah, personal feelings get involved about, which host you like and which host you don't. And we'll see if that comes into play tonight when we talk talk about where the 9, 8, and 7 on this list landed. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the next member of the top 10 here that we're going to get into. I'm very excited to reveal this person here at number 9, one of the more popular hosts in modern SNL history. And this is somebody who hosted 5 seasons in a row. So here we go. The man, John Mulaney, is here at number 9. Hosts season 43, episode 18, season 44, episode 14, season 45, again, episode 14. So practically 1 year later in that episode before COVID. Then we got season 46, episode 5, and season 47, episode 13, his 5-timers episode. So very interesting that Mulaney comes here in what, could have been number 1, right? You saw Pedro Pascal come onto this list, and then you start to think, oh, is Mulaney going to be 1? Like, is he going to get the modern day vote of that bump? But he does end up as 9 here. And for those who don't know the backstory on John Mulaney, obviously a writer on the show, one of the more popular modern day writers. He wrote for the show from season 34 to 37. Then his sister wrote for the show. He, was very well ingrained in, a very popular era of the show. Leaves for a little bit, has his own sitcom, I think on Fox, that doesn't really go so great. Ends up coming back to the show, cameos in a Bill Hader episode in season 43, and I think that's sort of ignited the spark of like, oh, let's bring back Mulaney to host and see how it goes. And it, that spark just blew into this flame that we got to see him come back season after season as he became the most popular host of this probably of the past 10 years. So very fascinating to talk about him here and some of his moments on the show. So Bill, we'll start with you tonight on John Mulaney. Would love to know your thoughts on him.
I'm so excited to talk about Mulaney. Not only the most popular, I would say probably the best host overall of the last 10 years. Probably would have had him a little bit higher, to be honest with you. His episodes are so classic. There's such great moments in it. The Broadway sketches, as we'll get into the sketches in a little bit, but all the Broadway sketches are fantastic. His stand-up monologues are really, really good. There's something about an SNL writer coming back to host SNL. There's something in the water. We've talked about Conan already, Tina, even Larry David, who wasn't a writer for very long, but there must be something about knowing the inner workings of the show when you come back as a host to be able to, well, as all of these people have done. So yeah, I'm really happy to see him here. I'm kind of surprised we didn't get to see him for a 6th season in a row. It really looked like the kind of trajectory that we were on, almost Goodman-esque, that, he'd be doing 6, 7, 8 in a row. So hopefully we do get him back this year. It's been a while since that epic 5-timers sketch. Would love to see him in season 50 for sure.
So, obviously one of the things that we didn't bring up yet, this story of John Mulaney is, some of the quote unquote off the field issues, right? Everyone loves John Mulaney, but, is, dealt with substance abuse issues where he's had to go to rehab, and he's talked about his experience. And even, a couple of these SNL episodes having to go through them, dealing with a lot of personal issues. So, that may have factored into why we get 5 and done for Mulaney, or maybe again, he'll come back again for 50. But it's a very fascinating arc here compared to some other hosts, because Casey, we've had the legend tier of hosts, people who have hosted almost 10 or more times, and they have hosted practically every season for a giant period of time. We've also had hosts who host 3 seasons in a row, 5 seasons in a row. Very unique. It's a really weird thing where you get 5 and then you don't see him again. So how do you place John Mulaney in your mind in SNL history? And do you think 9 is the right spot for him?
Well, I mean, maybe 10, 11, or 12 would be a little bit more appropriate spot if I were putting together the list myself. But I think, yeah, he does belong on some kind of list of all-time hosts somewhere. I feel like 9 is appropriate spot. And going back to what Bill Kenny said, it's like there's something in the water when a former writer hosts, someone who knows how the show works from the inside out, and someone who knows how to do one thing Mulaney did early on is in his first couple episodes, he gave new featured players like Heidi and Luke Null and Ego their own showcase, their own chances to shine. And that's something else that Seth did as a writer when they worked together there. Just figure out how do we get this person's voice on the show and develop it a bit more so that they could shine. And he started out doing that. And also, whenever any stand-up comic hosts, you get sort of a fresh, unique perspective brought to the show. And when Mulaney hosted for those first 2 times, that felt like really needed, just a fresh approach to sketch comedy in a time when we needed them to take a little step back from the Trump stuff that was kind of dominating the show at the time. So yeah, I liked his first 2 episodes. His third and fourth, I felt he was kind of he was getting a little complacent, kind of falling into patterns of doing he sort of leaned on some of the same recurring sketches as a crutch, like Uncle Meme with Pete Davidson and the Broadway musicals, and just felt like he was getting a little bit too complacent and falling into old patterns. And that'd be fine for a host like Justin Timberlake, a pop star, a musician who's just used to playing the old hits out on the road. But Mulaney was a writer, and he one of the more creative writers on the show. So I felt like I just wanted to see more from him. And yes, between his 4th and 5th time, he was dealing with those substance abuse issues, and thankfully dealt with those off the field. And by the time his 5th hosting stint came around, I was kind of dreading it in a way, because he wasn't really the only person having off the field issues. We all expected him to talk about rehab and having a baby and his new wife, and we also thought, Pete's going to talk about his thing with Kanye. And it was another week when we all thought World War III was going to start any minute, because that was when Putin was invading Ukraine. But thankfully, they avoided all that. Pete wasn't there, and they really pulled out all the stops to give us a lot more, creative sketches that let people shine, like Monkey Judge and Behind the Slime, and the 5 Timers Club. It's an old sketch they added a new twist to, and yeah, that's basically how I view John Mulaney's trajectory as a host. And he is one of the all-time greats in just the show's history. But yeah,
it's interesting. It's to talk about, I guess, because these things happen so recently, so much so that we do have full coverage of the season 46 and 47 episodes in our backlog here on the Saturday Night Network, where the 46 episode was the 5th episode we ever covered here. It was during that run of 6 episodes where in a row where they came back, during COVID, basically, and with all the protocols there. And Mulaney was one of the hosts that could basically, be a very easy week for them to carry them through. And then season 47 had its challenges, certainly, but I felt like that episode was one of the best episodes I've gotten to cover here on the podcast. And it was so much fun to get to talk about. So, there's a lot of interesting moments throughout these 5 seasons. Ike, I'd love to know from you how you're feeling about John Mulaney here at 9.
I love his placement on the list. In fact, I believe when I think of Mulaney on SNL, I just think like he embodies comedic writing. Like every one of his sketches, every line, even if you don't belly laugh, you're going to smirk at the very least. It's just like every line you will be laughing, I feel, when it comes to Mulaney sketches. And it's interesting you bring up his writing career on SNL, because he was a writer during me and you, John's favorite era of the show, like around that time period. So in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree, I feel like when he hosts, you get it's like he brings that old era, but he modernizes it for like today's audience at the same time. So it's like almost like a throwback in a way. But yeah, like every one of his episodes, I feel like the 4th one, I tried to be a little more generous with that, because we were dealing with certain times. I feel like the 4th one, if I had to rank him, is probably his weakest one, but that's no fault of him at all. And it's also a thing of, and Casey hinted at it a few seconds ago, he's hosting during a very, very interesting point in the show's history. I mean, we don't have to go into it. Y'all kind of know where I'm going with this. This is like in the middle of that Trump era. This is during that time where when that NBC logo comes up, I'm like, all right, what celebrity did they bring out to impersonate someone on the news? Let's get this over with. So I consider John, in my opinion, I consider Mulaney like the bright spot of that Trump era, because anytime his episode come in, you're just like, okay, they obviously got to do this part, but I know we're going into some silly stuff with this guy. He's just gonna keep us laughing the whole time. And I don't want to jump ahead on the best moments, but if I have to choose between Ben Stiller as Michael Cohen and Keenan as a singing lobster, I'm picking the singing lobster. I'm sorry, I'm not,
Yeah, that makes sense. It is interesting. Again, when he comes back to host, he does bring back some of his fellow writers that he worked with during those seasons. And I see in some of the credits, he works with Rob Klein. He works with Marika Sawyer, two of those writing partners that he really got along with and worked well with during season 34 through 37. And I think that as we transition over to some of his best moments from these 5 episodes, what's fascinating to me about them is that, some of these sketches that we really do like and celebrate from the 5 episodes are sketches that he brought to the show during those period in the 30s, but didn't necessarily get them on. The, Mulaney musicals, those were something that he wanted to do when he was writing on the show. Monkey Judge in season 47 is a sketch that he couldn't get on the show when he was a writer. So the fact that he then comes in and he's able to have sort of the free reign to transition his sketches into his episodes, I think really works for him and goes to show you that almost as good of a writer as he was in the 30s. And again, I think people were like, I remember hearing stories about old writers that would come back, like, legendary writers like a Jim Downey who would come back and see Mulaney's writing and be like, oh, this is a guy who could have written in any era. It almost shows you that he was capped in a way because he couldn't take over the show. But when he does host, he's allowed to take over the show a little bit. So I think the ceiling on his episodes is truly incredible. Bill, I'm going to start with you. Give us a couple moments from these episodes that people have to check out in case they missed a Mulaney episode in the last few years.
Well, it's like picking your favorite child with the Broadway musicals, because we've talked about this on a couple of the Superfan episodes. It's a Sophie's choice trying to figure out which one is best. I personally think that it's probably Souvenir Underwear, even though that's one of the later Broadway musicals. I really, really think that one is hilarious. And the fact that it's happening during COVID when there's still all these restrictions going on, yet they find a way to get most of the cast involved in that. Probably the best Chad that we ever get, which is a guilty pleasure of mine. It's Unknown Caller in season 44, where Mulaney is playing like the Scream type, bad guy who's calling Chad, telling him that his girlfriend's murdered outside the window. And there's just so many to go through. My God, it's so great. Talk about PDD. This is one of the last time that he was on, which was the Good Variant, where we get Mulaney as a weatherman, and he's talking about the variant that's going on. We get the Roker cameo, and then it and the Paul Rudd cameo, which leads into the epic Five Timers Club. They injected a whole new life into Five Timers with Mulaney's episode with this. We get Conan, we get Elliot Gould, we get Tina Fey, we get Candace. So there's just so much good stuff going on. As you said, John, like this was one of the most fun weeks we had doing the podcast, being able to talk about Mulaney and all the things that he brought to the show. And of course, all the monologues. I mean, there's so many great stand-ups. Somebody mentioned it in the chat. The first one, Salt and Pepper, when he's talking about Patrick Stewart announcing the musical guest in the 90s. So just a few of the amazing highlights that this guy has had.
Yeah, so many good ones here. And about that Five Timers Club, I mean, truly just so cool to get to watch it happen live. I remember being like, I don't want to know anything. I knew that this was happening that night, but I didn't want to be spoiled on who was there. And thankfully, like our friends here behind the scenes, like did not spoil me. And I was like very much like, okay, great. This is so cool seeing Elliot Gould and Conan and all of those guys. And it was just an awesome moment. And one of those nights where everything really comes together. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting here because I wouldn't say we were like out of COVID in 47, but it's fascinating to watch these 5 episodes and see like pre-COVID, then like really pre-COVID, like almost to the point where people are like, they're making COVID jokes on Update, like not realizing how bad it's going to get, then a full COVID episode of him, and then a sort of like, hey, we're out of this for a little bit. And I think it's just really, I think in 10 or 15 years from now, we're going to look back at these 5 episodes and be like, that was a crazy trajectory that he was on. Casey, for you, any other moments that you want to bring up as Mulaney's best moments?
I mean, from the list you have on screen, I mean, any of his monologues, the switcheroo, the cha-cha slide, monkey judge, but also there's the drag brunch from his first one. I mean, Bodega Bathroom and Airport Sushi are the only Mulaney musicals I'd recommend. Uncle Meme's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. The Birds and Sleepy Hollow sketches from his Halloween one. And the Five Timers Club, which it does make me think that when you consider that they had him host 5 times in 4 years, it felt like it was a little bit too much too fast with Mulaney, and he was kind of an acquired taste to some people. But he took a moment to step back and just reflect on himself, and he reminded us why we liked him in the first place. So, and they were going to, lean on him a bit during COVID because he was just a well-liked presence behind the scenes too, and that's something they needed. But yeah, he's a guy that can always pull through, and that's why he's in the top 10. That's why he's in the Five Timers Club in such a short amount of time. He can always pull through when you need him. He's always there in the clutch.
Ike, how about you? When you went back and looked at these 5 episodes, any moments that you thought really stood out?
Oh, well, you hit on a few of them. The monologues, this is when I wish I had my notes because there were so many good gems in there during those monologues, man. One that stands out to me right now off the top of my head is the one where he's like, "Hi, I'm John Mulaney. I host every week." And this is his second appearance. Like, he's like, he already knows, yeah, they're gonna keep me around for a little bit. So here's the thing. When this originally aired, the diner sketch, I was not the biggest fan of it. I mean, I thought it was cool, but I was like, man, like everyone's going crazy over it. I remember even Pete talking about how I think he said that's one of his like favorite things he ever did was being a part of that. On the rewatch, I like the sketch a lot more. I just like how like weird it is and just like unabashedly silly. Now, did they have to bring it back another 4 times? That's another story for another time. I don't know. I think what makes that work, I think what would have made it work better if that was just a one-time deal. But that's kind of like how SNL is. If something's working, we're gonna keep it going. Switcheroo was a good one. I just love, Cecily's reactions to all this kind of messed up reboot of the sitcom. I also love the Blue River dog food. That was a good one. And this is during a time where I wasn't the biggest fan of later years Cecily, like in her later years, but that and the switcheroo sketch reminds me of why she's like one of the best to ever do it on the show. Her and Mulaney, that chemistry is just great. I got to bring this one up, and I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet. The What's That Name sketch. On the rewatch of that made me miss Bill Hader. I know why he doesn't come back as often as he does, but just him, like, I consider it like, if I'm to put it in rap music terminology, I think Mulaney's Dr. Dre and Bill Hader's Eminem. It's just like that chemistry is just so strong in these SNL sketches. They just know how to work with each other. Even the part where Bill's like, no, get the camera over here. What did you mean by that? It's like he just takes control of the whole sketch, and this is supposed to be Mulaney's episode, but he just takes control for like the next 5 minutes of the whole show, and I just love it. The strolling pre-tape on the 4th episode, I thought that was real fun. That was kind of again, we're dealing with a serious election, but they found a way to sort of, have a little fun with it. Now, this next moment, though, a lot of people don't know it because it's actually not an actual sketch on the show. It's more of a promo. It's like during one of those Wednesday promos they do where it's kind of like a sketch, but it's not. So this is before John's second episode, and it's like the whole premise is he's been auditioning for Saturday Night Live for the past 44 years, but he's like literally the same age. So you got like footage of him like in the 70s, like the 80s, is like, and it keeps shooting him auditioning for the show. And then my favorite part is Keenan's lines like, "Well, it's like he never ages," and I'm like, dude, you could do like 6 Good Burger movies like right now talking about not aging, man. But it's just, but like you guys say, it's just so much good stuff in these 5 episodes, man.
Those are some great points. And I love what you said about him and Bill Hader. I mean, Bill Hader was voted by the fans when we did this last year as the #1 cast member. And, a big part of that is John Mulaney. So him being the brains behind the operation, as, obviously not to take anything away from Bill, but, everyone needs, their help a little bit. And Mulaney wrote so many of Bill Hader's greatest sketches, including What's That Name, that, it just makes sense that collaboration would be one of the greatest writer cast member pairings in SNL history. A couple interesting things about Mulaney that I had written down. I mean, I think, one of the things that really works for Mulaney on screen, I think, is his cadence when he speaks. He has like a little bit of an Adam Driver, Christopher Walken thing, that the way he delivers lines, I think is so unique and so Mulaney that I think we can look forward to almost putting him in a sketch as himself. And it just works. I think about all of like the old time classic movie sketches that they did with him over the years. And he's basically just playing a version of John Mulaney in all of those sketches. And for me, that's why, like, I do think the hosts, like the Walkens, the Drivers, and I would put Mulaney in that category, really do work because they're just so funny on their own that when you start to like play with them a little bit, it elevates everything else. So I think that is something that I really think about when it comes to John Mulaney. And the other thing I start to think about is like, save for Steve Martin, is John Mulaney the greatest stand-up host in SNL history? Because he is a stand-up at heart. We see his monologues, they're super strong. At the end of the list, we could talk about where all the stand-ups landed on this. But Bill, is it possible that we're looking here at the #1, if not #2, stand-up host in the history of Saturday Night Live here?
Absolutely. Definitely in the discussion. I mean, you have Richard Pryor, you have Don Rickles, you have some others but they only host at one time, many of them. You've got Sam Kinison. I mean, there's a good list of stand-ups that have done the show over the years. But yeah, I think Mulaney and Steve are probably on their own island as far as abilities, coming back to the show time after time. I mean, the later years with Steve, he wasn't doing as much stand-up, but those early years with Steve, you can kind of put side by side with Mulaney's as far as the monologues go, for being all-time classic moments, working their stand-up into the routine of the monologue and kind of making it their own. And yeah, definitely in the conversation.
Casey, isn't that like a crazy thought though? Like, imagine like we're just like hanging out at a coffee shop. We're just sitting around like talking about great stand-up hosts in the history of SNL, and like it all just clicks for us. Like, oh wow, like Mulaney might have put himself up there as the greatest stand-up host ever. I mean, because Steve Martin, probably he gets it by default, but then he sort of like moves away from stand-up at a certain point. So it's almost, if you didn't watch the 70s Steve Martin episodes, you almost don't think of him as a stand-up. So like there is an argument there, like you could squint and see it, that Mulaney might be the greatest ever. How do you feel about that statement?
I mean, it's not totally inaccurate. I mean, the least you could say is like John Mulaney's the safest choice for a stand-up host now, because he's the least divisive out of all of today's big name stand-up comics that they've had hosting recently. People like Chappelle and Amy Schumer, and they have their fans and detractors, but John Mulaney always tries to have something for everyone. He doesn't try to be, too edgy or too out there I'm making a stand on this one thing. So he's definitely in the top 10 of stand-up hosts, if not all-time host, maybe even in the top 5, just for, having the same, mass appeal stand up in like the late 2010s and early 2020s. That he has the same appeal as a stand up that Steve Martin had in his day in the 70s when he was, selling out big venues like Red Rocks and stuff. So um, it's not a bad argument to make, but yeah, he's up there in the all-time stand-up hosts of SNL. I mean, he could even do the monologue for the 50th anniversary like Steve did for the 40th. Who knows? I could see that happening.
I could definitely see that happening. So let me go through his resume as we start to, head towards final thoughts on Mulaney here. So, as far as I look at my criteria, like, could Mulaney have been a cast member? I mean, certainly, right? I mean, he's a writer for so many years. He auditioned for the show, eventually developed this on-air personality. We did see him on Update a couple times during his time as a writer. And I think, like, based on what we saw as a host, I think if he was given enough time to work his raw talent, I think that, yes, he could have fit in there. Can he work with multiple casts? Well, here's the interesting thing, right? I do think he works well with practically any cast member. Casey made a great point that, feature players, he tries to work them in. I think he really could work in any era, but he doesn't host in any era. He basically hosts in only one era. So the question is how much do you value that when you start to parse through some of the greatest hosts ever? The fact that he has hosted 5 times, but they were all within, 5 seasons. A lot of those seasons, can be counted as part of the same era because, the cast who may have left prior to 46 never ended up leaving. So basically from 43 through 47, we have like almost the same exact cast with Mulaney, and he's almost like the host of that cast. So it's almost hard to judge how he would do in other eras, though we can naturally assume he would be great. Does he have a defining characteristic he brings to the show? Certainly, I definitely believe that. His analytics, pretty good all around. I think there's, slightly deflated the 7.6 we see on screen for the SPE by that COVID episode where we had less sketches during season 46. So I think it would be about average, but, hosting 5 times, guest appearances, a couple of characters that we see between the cha-cha slide guy and other elements that we saw on the show. For me, and he also does some impressions. He did, I remember Alan Dershowitz, he did at one point. Like, he did, so there's some fun impressions that he did while he was a host on the show. And from a legacy perspective, like I said, I think he definitely gets marks for being the greatest modern day host that we've seen. So for me, checks a lot of boxes here. Ike, I'm going to start with you for final thoughts on John Mulaney here at 9.
Yeah, there's nothing really left to say. I mean, I agree with you guys. If he's not the best stand-up host, he's in the conversation, absolutely. Because, like Casey said, he's not as divisive as like a Chappelle or an Amy Schumer or anything like that. I will say, as far as the 50th season goes, he was in Paris helping to promote the 50th season. So you got to think that's a clue he's going to be involved in some way. And I agree with Casey. I'd have him do that opening monologue for 50th. And if he is scheduled to host, this is how I would do it, because I think it got out that he was offered the Academy Awards, but he turned it down. What I would do is I would have him host the weekend of the Academy Awards as a way, as the classic SNL way of flipping people off. I think that would be hilarious if they do that. So that's my prediction for Mulaney in the 50th.
Yeah, and he's just coming off the Everybody is in LA during the Netflix is a Joke Fest, and he did a fantastic job with that. Shows you his ability to be a late night host potentially, if that had been his path. So, I could see him also hosting this season. If they announced that John Mulaney was hosting the premiere, I think we'd all be pretty excited about it as well. Like, he could host at any point during season 50, and I think everyone would be really happy about it. He seems to be in a good place, and that's what's most important. Casey, let me get your final thoughts on John Mulaney here at 9.
Well, yeah, I do agree with Ike. I mean, he did. Well, first of all, he turned down the Oscars, but he did a monologue at either Golden Globes or some award show that that made people think, wow, he should have hosted. That was great. I mean, he blew Joe Coy out of the water, and it's funny that we agree that he could be a cast member, because he might be the first to tell you that he couldn't, because he's said in interviews with Seth and a couple other times, he said that, when he was offered the job as a writer back in 2008, that he was grateful for that, because he didn't think he could be a member of the same cast as Bill Hader, Fred Armisen, Kristen Wiig, Jason Dixon before. He said like he couldn't even do Weekend Update because he didn't want to take that from Seth. He said like, yeah, writing for those guys was like writing lyrics for, Bob Dylan or Paul McCartney, whoever, but he somehow felt he could come back and work with the later cast that included, Heidi Gardner, Pete Davidson, Ego Woodham, all those people, the more modern cast. He felt he could be a member of that cast, but not the one he was writing for, which and yeah, he has worked with multiple casts, but yeah, it's just an interesting take when you think about what he said about how he feels he works best on the show.
Right. And that's interesting, right? Because does that have more to do with the quality of the eras where he wrote in an era that was, so well regarded that maybe he felt like he couldn't necessarily stack up in that era, but with the era that he did host in, had he been a cast member in that era, I think maybe he, is one of the better cast members of the era potentially, and when all is said and done. So it's just an interesting thought experiment that we have when we talk about this type of stuff. Bill, let's head over to you for your final thoughts on John Mulaney here and where he landed at 9.
Yeah, just a perfect placement for him. I think you can't really hold the multiple cast thing against him as much as we have other people because he's part of the modern times. If we're talking about this 5-10 years from now, he hasn't come back. He pulls a Timberlake or a John Hamm, then it's like, okay, well, maybe we have to push him down a little bit on the list. But Casey brought up a great point earlier about the fact that part of the era that he hosted in with how bad it is with the Trump stuff. And there's such uneven seasons to have. And, I've said it multiple times how I don't usually watch full episodes from that era because of how bogged down it is with cameos and nonsense. But the Mulaney episodes hold up, put them up against any other era as far as, back to front, really great episodes of SNL. I think he'll be back in 50. I think that Netflix show really kind of boosted him, and we will see him at some point in 50 hosting for sure. And I look forward to it.
All right, there you go. John Mulaney locked in here at number 9 on the list. Let's head to the next host we are revealing tonight, and that is number 8 on the list. Another member of the 5 Timers Club, somebody who every time they hosted, I was so excited about because this is somebody who brought a ton of energy to the show, a ton of characters, somebody who in another life you could definitely have seen as an SNL cast member, and that is at number 8. Melissa McCarthy comes in here, somebody who hosted in season 37 for the first time in October of 2011, comes back the following season in April of 2013, musical guest Phoenix. Season 39, episode 13 follows that. So 3 seasons in a row with Imagine Dragons. That one being the final episode for Seth Meyers as a cast member. A lot of people remember that episode for that. Season 41, episode 13 comes back 2 seasons later with Kanye West in 2016. And then for the final time up until now, season 42, episode 20 with musical guest Haim in 2017. So somebody who also hosted a few seasons in a row, pretty close to each other, and made a huge impact when they hosted the show. So let's talk about the legendary Melissa McCarthy here, where she lands at number 8. Ike Moore, I'm going to head over to you. What are your thoughts on Melissa McCarthy as a host here at 8?
Oh, man, I loved rewatching these episodes. And obviously, I don't know the rest of this top 10 list. We're only talking about the ones we're talking about tonight. But it'll be really interesting if she's the only woman in this top 10. But rightfully so, she deserves that spot, man. Like, she was always known because she was like in Gilmore Girls and all that. But I don't think people really remember. Like, I'm sure we all remember it, but I don't think people really remember how huge this Bridesmaids thing was. Like, I know people talk about The Hangover and the Jump Street movies, but when Bridesmaid came out, that was insane. She's getting nominated for a supporting actress Oscar for a comedy. That's insane, man. So when she hosts that first show, there's like an insane buzz, like, because she's already the talk of the town and everything. And I forgot how good that first episode was. Like, I'm telling you right now, I pretty much laughed myself stupid like 3 sketches in. Like, I just couldn't. I just forgot how good that stuff is. And a lot of it is she just commits to the physicality She commits to like the bits and everything. And I also forgot, like, really, she's hosting in very interesting parts of the show's legacy. Like the first show she hosts, that ends up being Kristen's last season. Second show she hosts, that's the last season of Fred, Jason, and Bill. The third time she hosts, that's during Seth's last show before he goes off to late night. The fourth time, nothing really too big happens unless you want to count that whole Beyonce sketch that went viral. Like that was a big thing, I remember. And then the fifth one's the Five Timers one. So she's really hosting the very, very important episodes in the show's history. And after the fifth one, aside from a cameo she does in 2018 on Weekend Update, where I think she plays Michael Che's stepmom, we don't really see her a lot. And I can't help but I think I chalk it up to more of her busy schedule, because I think she's had a movie come out, at least one movie come out every year since 2017. So maybe it's just a scheduling issue. She's also married, she has kids, so I understand. I thought for sure we were going to see her. I think it was 2023 or 2022 when that Little Mermaid live action film came out. I thought for sure we were going to see her there. And then, you get that maybe they could poke fun the fact of how big of that controversy was that there was a black Little Mermaid. I thought that was when we were going to see her again, but we didn't. So, but her legacy of the show is just, man, what commitment that was. Like how much fun those episodes were.
Totally. I think she was made for Saturday Night Live, and the show was made for her. Like, she fits this show like a glove. And every time she comes in, I just feel like I could just envision her being a part of the cast. Like, I don't know that there's another great female host in SNL history that does it as well as her. And that is where, I start to think about how she compares when we're talking about some of the Scarlett Johanssons and Tina Feys and Kristen Wiggs, who are obviously former cast members. But, in the case of her being so unique and coming in, I think she just fits it so well. And that's why they end up, having her, collaborating with other cast members in Bridesmaids, again, in Ghostbusters and all that stuff, because she fits into the system so well that I'd love getting to see her on the show. Casey, I'm so curious how you feel about Melissa McCarthy as a host and coming in here at 8.
I feel very strongly about her as a host. I feel like, she belongs in the top 10. Maybe 8's a little low, but yeah, she's definitely someone who, she has a likable personality. How can you not like her? And she has connections to people like Kristen Wiig and Kate McKinnon outside the show. She might have been in the Groundlings with Wiig, as one commenter pointed out, but yeah, she has connections to. Well, she's able to have chemistry with like pretty much every member of the cast when she hosts, and yeah, she brings a lot of just warmth and good energy to the show, and she for the most part, she always brings new characters and never really relied on any of the same recurring things to any of the same recurring characters when she hosts. So she brings all this to the show, and she always brings something new in terms of performance and characterization and just writing. They know how to write for her. They know how to play to her strengths. So yeah, I think she's at a very well-earned, well-deserved spot on this list.
Yeah, to me, it's fascinating to talk about her, because I do think, sometimes, like, since I've started podcasting, and again, it was a few years after she stopped hosting, I do feel like we don't talk about her episodes enough as being, a showcase of a brilliant talent that is really made for the show, Bill. So I'm curious for you how you feel about Melissa here at 8.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we talked about it with Driver. We talked about it with Buck Henry. This is the kind of host, when they come in, they've been saving some of these sketches because they know she'll do anything. And really, those first 3 times, especially that she hosts, she does anything. We'll start talking about some of them, but like that taste test is one of the most banana sketches we've gotten in modern SNL history. And she just fully commits to it, has no problem with looking like a fool, being covered in ranch dressing. Like it's fantastic. And they have kind of fallen under the radar. And I do wonder if it is because it now has been 7 years. Just another one of these folks who did not come back for whatever reason that they decided. But whoever is left on this list, whoever the last 7 people are, we know there's not a lot of females left because of the history of SNL, because of the spotty history of having really great females come in and host on a consistent basis. So this puts her in the Mount Rushmore of females, and I am completely okay with that. She's up there with the Tinas and the Kristens for sure.
Yeah, I think when all is said and done, I think she might be my greatest woman host in SNL history. And it's just truly because I think she fits all 3 categories of best, greatest, and legacy. And that's really what I'm looking for to check. Like, if I get to sum down all my points, best in terms of her experience with the Groundlings, coming in and being able to bring characters to the show right away. Like, yes, we see them in pockets because she's hosting once, but I think that like the characters that she brings to the show in the episodes, to me, are as good as Kristen Wiig characters. And I mean that with the highest compliment, because, there really are, as a part of, similar eras. Kristen, we get to see her do these characters a bunch of times a season, and they start to like build like lore among the show. But if, the taste test lady, the whole, there's a Hidden Valley Ranch party in my mouth, that could have been something that could have been, it's hard to say without laughing, but that could have been something that could be replicated so many times over. And again, I know a lot of people don't love recurring characters the way that I do, but for me, like, I feel like I could just envision all of the different characters in different places and time throughout, situations in the episodes, had she been a cast member from season 37 to 42. But instead, we get these 5 episodes from her where I think, they're pure Melissa McCarthy. She does this amazing thing of, she'll start a sketch. It'll be super quiet. You don't know what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, this character will come out and just explode on screen. And that's something I absolutely love about her, and her ability to transform on stage into what you need her to be. So let's talk about some of her best moments during these 5 episodes, in case you don't remember them or you haven't watched them. So, Ike, let me start with you for a couple of them that you want to remind the listeners about.
All of her monologues, every last one of them, there is something special with it. From like the first one where she's dancing with Kristen, the second one where those ridiculous heels she's wearing, that's just her messing with the monologue format, and I loved it. The third one where she's fighting with wires with Bobby. The fourth one where she thinks it's her 5th one, but it's not. And then I feel like the SNL stats community, that was y'all's favorite sketch, because there's the whole thing. Well, I was at the 40th. No, that doesn't count. That one, like, I could just imagine y'all. No, right. I can just imagine y'all being like, "You're dang right, it doesn't count." And then the 5th one, she has this sweet moment with this lady who I'm assuming was a real cast member. She just gives her a tour back behind the scenes, and then she lets her come out of the main doorway. Like, all those are just sweet monologue moments. The Hidden Valley Ranch one, that had me dying the first time I saw it. And it's just like her interactions with Sue, and just her being like, "Sue, we all hate you. It's just like, what?" It's like her delivery is just insane in those types of sketches. I love hopefully I get the name right. The Sheila Kelly sketches, both of them. I absolutely love them. I'm convinced, I thought, if I was Lorne Michaels or Melissa McCarthy, I would have tried to get that movie made during that time, like just a Sheila Kelly movie. I would watch the heck out of that. I mean, I know we don't always like SNL inspired films, but I would be there front row if that ever came out. There's the woman.
Well, can I just stop down on that, Ike, for a second, which is, the Sheila Kelly character that you're talking about is the basketball coach that we get to see, in a special news report and Outside the Lines, a very popular like ESPN show. And just the ability to do it in live sketch, but also in pre-tape form. It was a really impressive sketch to get to see. And again, it's this thing that Melissa McCarthy does where she can she can bring it up to 11. She could do like the Chris Farley thing of just like taking a sketch and just exploding on screen and being crazy and like all the attention's on her. But then she could also rein it back. And I think it's some of the more subtle moments in sketches like that, where she's like, you know, whipping a toaster at the back of Cecily Strong, that I think is, you know, is great, because it's not something that is just like screaming, yelling in your face, but there's also like a sort of a passive aggressiveness to her that I think she plays really well. Like, I guess in summary, Ike, what I'm trying to say is that she could do aggressive and passive aggressive really well, which is something that's really hard to do in comedy.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And the only other one I'm gonna bring up real quick is the women's group one, where it's like everyone's talking about their vision boards and all this type of stuff, and then she's out there lamenting her murdered father, and then she's like, "Here's my vision board of me standing above his dead body," like, no. I was just like, like you just said, her delivery is just amazing in those sketches. Like, I could go on, but I don't want to steal anyone else's favorites.
Yeah. Those are so good. Let's head over to Casey. Casey, what are some other ones or any moments on your list that you want to talk about?
I mean, I'd recommend, well, she opened with the Lawrence Welk sketch where she played Denise's like swole sister with the beaver teeth. So she added a new element to that. That was nice. She, the office flirt sketch from her first one. I mean, whenever she worked with Sudeikis or a few other people, she gave it a real loose improv type feel. The comment section from the first episode, not exactly a big Melissa showcase, but that was one that I liked. I mean, that was like the fourth time monologue that hit a little too close to home for me. Her and Sandberg later in that, at the end of that episode, do a sketch where they, you know, field complaints from their ex-lovers about their lovemaking. Her second one had the ham sketch, the voice sketch, the first Sheila Kelly, and also, you know, one I'm surprised no one really talked about was when she played Barb Kellner, a woman who went to get a bank loan for her pizza business, but she didn't want to open up her own pizzeria. She wanted to just start a business where she just drove around in a van and just went to places where people just had, you know, leftover old pizza that they didn't want, and that she would eat that pizza herself. She wanted a business loan for that, and
she kept handing him the pen to like sign the agreements.
That was funny. And I mean, I feel like we have to talk a little bit about Sean Spicer. Just at the beginning of the Trump era, when we had a very small feeling of, oh, this is going to be good. This might be good. She played the guy who was his, you know, first press secretary, who he fired after 4 months. And yeah, it was an exaggerated. I think Sheila Kelly eventually became her Sean Spicer, and it was very exaggerated or over the top. But yeah, like Trump and everyone who worked for him, that was, you know, he was a very whiny defensive man. And just after that, it felt like, okay, this wasn't going to be as good as we thought. There's, as far as like the parade of cameos to play Trump's people, there's like a fine line between Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer and, you know, Ben Stiller as Michael Cohen, or De Niro as Robert Mueller. It's like Sean Spicer was like the last time they felt like they didn't need to do anything besides just having fun with it. And then from then on, it was like they had to make a big sort of empty statement that wasn't really going to affect anything either way. But yeah, that was like, and it probably helps that like she only did that like 4 times, and they didn't really do it every week or every other week. But yeah, I think yeah, those are the highlights I'd recommend.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that the Sean Spicer thing happens like right before her last time hosting the show. Like, you almost imagine like, if the Sean Spicer thing doesn't happen, does she end up hosting again, or is she sort of like burnt out on SNL a little bit from coming back those 4 times? And I think one of them was while she was hosting to do Spicer, because that was like a phenomenon at the time. I mean, I know that we had Larry David with Bernie, and we obviously had Baldwin with Trump, but like the fact that they nailed another one they got Melissa McCarthy to do Spicer, like then they obviously flew too close to the sun. But like to do that with the whole thing, with the moving podium and all that stuff, I mean, that was some all-time great stuff. I think if we were going to do this list of like top 50 cold opens ever, I think like the cold open with her, again, like that wasn't the original one, but I think it was the second one was a cold open. Like it was amazing. It was just amazing to see her work the room and do all of that. And again, goes to show you that you could just imagine what it would have been like if Melissa McCarthy was a cast member on Saturday Night Live. Bill, for you, let's talk about some other moments or any of the ones that Ike or Casey mentioned as your favorites to point out.
Yeah, these guys have mentioned so many great ones. Pizza Business is one of my favorite sketches that we've gotten over the last 15 years or so. $1 Million Wheel, which was a play on Wheel of Fortune. She's the Vanna White type fill-in, but she doesn't know where the letters are, so she just keeps turning over the wrong letters and can't find the right ones. It's just kind of a great manic energy that she puts into that one. Art Exhibit with Nassim playing this great role, and Nassim Pedrad, where they're playing these their art characters. They're just kind of in place and they're not supposed to move. And Melissa comes in as the janitor and keeps interrupting the whole sit. And she was sent there by Danny Trance, and you know, she doesn't know how else to explain it. And she just keeps getting in a fight with this little boy who's playing one of the characters in Nassim. And Nassim has the Bert from Sesame Street eyebrows to really kind of give it a great visual as well. Yeah, I mean, Whiskers Are We get a great moment with her and Kate in that one as well. I mean, you can just go on and on with her. You know, if you have listened to our Blues Brothers convention coverage, Dan Aykroyd himself mentions Melissa McCarthy as one of the modern people that has carried SNL into, you know, great territory. So I think that's true for her as well.
I agree. And, you know, going through some of the resume of Melissa McCarthy that we have up on screen here, you know, could she have been a cast member? I think the answer is absolutely. That's the first thing I think about her when I think about her time at the show. Can she work with multiple casts? I mean, I do think that there is, you know, though she hosts 5 seasons out of 6, there's a lot of transition between those seasons. So I do think we get to see her work with a range of cast members, though she is typically the alpha when she's in sketches, which is really interesting to think about with her compared to some other hosts that are great at being like a beta in a sketch. Does she have a defining characteristic that she brings to the show? I think it's extremely unique and powerful what she brings to the show. So for me, Melissa McCarthy is definitely a brand. Her analytics are a little interesting. I think you might notice on screen a 6.0 SPE. That's pretty low. But yeah, I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if I should factor that into how I would rate her overall in terms of maybe her not taking over the episodes, or is that more circumstantial? So maybe you have to dive into that a little bit more to explore why that number is so low. But for me, like I said, I think she makes the most of those moments, even if it's only 6 per episode. So that's a factor. And then legacy. Look, at the time, you know, around the time she hosted for the 5th time with the time she's doing Spicer, I think she was as hot as it got for an SNL host. 7 years later, I think the legacy has worn off a little bit. And I think it's about time that we fight to get Melissa McCarthy to host Saturday Night Live again. She is so good. She is somebody that I think could host the show 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Like there's no reason why, especially with the lack of, you know, women representation in the people who have hosted the show the most over these last 50 years, that when you have such a great host like Melissa McCarthy, you do only have them host 5 times and not again for 7 years. If she doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But I think on this special anniversary season, now is the time to bring her back onto the show. So for me, this spot here at 8 is a great spot for her. To me, she slammed on top 10. Totally well-deserved over here. So let's close the book on our conversation about Melissa McCarthy. And Ike, I'll start with you for final thoughts.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Agree with what everyone said. I did want to bring this up real quick. My other favorite moment is she probably has also one of my favorite inductions of the 5 timers, where it's literally 3 minutes before the show's about to end, and then Steve Martin just shows up out of nowhere. I'm convinced, unless somebody tells me otherwise, that was sort of slightly unscripted. And he just comes in, he's like, "Oh, we got to do the 5 timers thing," because her reaction, and then everybody's just like, and Melissa just like, "You're Steve Martin." He's like, "I know." It's just so like seeing her being like a fangirl, like those few seconds was just really, it was really cute to me. As far as, yeah, like everything you said, her legacy is real strong. I I would die if she comes back in 50. Like, I just feel like there's so much, like, especially with the cast now, like her and Bowen Yang alone, I feel like those are viral moments waiting to happen. I just feel like she could have so much fun with this newer cast. Even if she doesn't host, just her cameo and just do something. Because I feel like her presence is surely missed when it comes to her on SNL.
I agree. Casey, let me head over to you for final thoughts on Melissa McCarthy.
Well, just a couple things. I mean, yeah, she has. I mean, she could be a cast member. She on SNL or Mad TV, and she's like proved that she was born to do sketch comedy in some fashion, and but she also proved that she has the talent and drive for you know bigger things in her career than just spending 5 years or 8 years as a cast member in SNL. So it's probably for the best that she got to do sketch comedy by hosting SNL to promote her sitcoms and movies. And when you think about it, Melissa McCarthy really did help change the way that the show is broadcast because around the time that she was playing Spicer, I mean the show started to get some bigger ratings, better press off the early Trump stuff, and then a couple months later, NBC makes the announcement that they're doing this thing where, well, SNL is a live show, but we're kind of sad that only uh, half the country gets to share in the fun of it being live and just have fun with these surprises like Melissa McCarthy playing this guy. So we're gonna start, airing the show live in each time zone. So each half of the country gets to see it an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours earlier. So the whole country can see it live at the same time. That happened at the very beginning of the Trump era. And if that kind of shakes the foundation of the show and the way people see it. I mean, it's even being broadcast live streamed on Peacock now. So, if that doesn't, put her she created a ripple effect as host that literally changed the way people view the show. So if that doesn't put her in the pantheon of all-time great hosts, then everything else she did will too. So yeah,
I love that point. Yeah, that truly, I didn't think about that, Casey, and it truly does justify having her in my top 10 for sure. So, Bill, final thoughts on Melissa McCarthy, and we'll close the book on her for now.
Yeah, like I said, Mount Rushmore of female hosts, and very close to the Mount Rushmore of all hosts, for sure. I think a sixth or even a seventh hosting gig would definitely put her over the top and possibly move her in the top 5 if we revisit this in 5 or 10 years or so. Either way, she's an all-time classic, and love to see everything that she's done on the show.
Okay, that's Melissa McCarthy here at 8. All right, let's do it. Let's get to number 7 on this list. This is a big name, a very big name in SNL history that we're going to talk about here. Somebody who a lot of people have, potentially in their Mount Rushmore, if not near it. Here at number 7, somebody who's hosted one of the most times in SNL history, 13 times, 11 seasons in a row at one point. Number 7 is John Goodman here. Wow. This is quite the resume to talk about with John Goodman, who hosts for the first time in season 15 back in 1989, that year where we get to meet a lot of greats for the first time, including, Walken and Baldwin. I think Woody Harrelson also that year. And we get to see Goodman, and he comes out and he hosts, and then again and again and again and again. And for me, just one of the more fascinating things to get to see him just come back, as we know we're going to get an annual John Goodman episode from the 90s all the way into the early 2000s. Just so well associated with SNL and Roseanne at the time, which obviously he was, a big a part of. We got to see his sitcom basically end during his time hosting year after year, then in a bunch of movies, comes back and has, a really interesting resume to talk about. I want to get the panel's thoughts because I have some I have some interesting takes on where I feel John Goodman should be on this list, because naturally hosting 13 times, like I said, 11 seasons in a row, takes a break for that 12th time for 1 year, and then comes back all the way later in 2013. Conventionally, you would think, okay, it has to be, top 3, top 5 or something like that. But does he truly belong in that place? So let's talk about John Goodman overall here at number 7, Casey Killingsworth. Let's start with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, John Goodman is going to be a fun host to talk about because he was, I mean, if you're my age, if you're our age, he was kind of a, peripheral figure in your childhood, and that he was probably, on TV a lot. Certainly in my household, like if I wasn't watching a rerun of him on SNL on Comedy Central, my mom was probably watching a rerun of Roseanne, or maybe a movie he was on TV, and Melissa McCarthy's kind of taken that spot 20 years later. But yeah, you can obviously see he's a great guy to work with. People love him as an actor, and he works well. He blends into the show really well and works well with every cast member behind the scenes. Y'all love working with him, which is why he's been on so many times. And it also, he might blend into the show a little bit too well as far as blending into the background, because maybe in a few earlier episodes they didn't use him as much. Supposedly in season 20 he couldn't show up till the Saturday of that week because of some scheduling conflicts. So I guess Dan Aykroyd was kind of the de facto host to bring in to help pick up some of that slack, and that would happen a couple more times. But like into the the Will Ferrell, Adam McKay era, they would figure out how to use him better and play to his strengths a bit more. Like Adam McKay himself said, him and Baldwin and Walken and maybe Hanks were the hosts that whenever they came back frequently, they would always be more open to the the weirder, stranger, more conceptual sketches. And yeah, it did get to a point too where it felt like they were kind of unfairly exploiting him. Like they were, at one point they based a whole monologue that's not in this list. At one point, besides a monologue where he has to convince the audience that they're not watching a rerun from 1991, there's a couple of years before that, he pokes fun at himself for losing so much weight so fast, to the point where he's so dizzy and adamant he thinks he's going to show Styx videos while we have apes dressed as gladiators fight each other. And then in season 25, that monologue was based around them, like Will Ferrell and Tim Meadows staging like a mini intervention for him due to an alleged drinking problem they say he has. And so maybe he only hosted like a couple more times after that. So he knew when to, he knew when to quit too, maybe to step back for like personal reasons or health reasons, as it were. It's like when Robert Smigel said when they did the Carcinio sketch, there were rumors that that was the thing that sort of pushed Johnny Carson out of retirement, because he saw it, he heard about it, and said, well, if they're making fun of me now, I know that this is a time for me to go. It's time for me to retire. And Goodman must have felt the same way toward the end, where they did a monologue about his drinking problem. So yeah, he was a great guy, likable actor, showed a lot of range, great to work with, and knew when to maybe take a step back if they were letting him make fun of himself a little too much. But yeah, overall, he still has a great legacy as an actor, great legacy as an SNL host and performer. And yeah, that's, where I stand with John Goodman. So what about you guys?
Well, for me, like, I think he's an SNL sponge. And I love how you said that he just fits into the show so well, because I think that, the show will use him in any way that he'll give them. And it's very different than some of the other hosts who have hosted so many times, where they clearly put their mark on the show. To me, I don't think John Goodman has any brand that he brings to the show. There's no defining characteristic that I look at. I'm like, that's a John Goodman episode. He's just really fits into the era and blends perfectly. Like if you know what the vibe of that season is, John Goodman's just like another episode there, and he has some really great moments and some really good sketches. But overall, I don't think he has like the impact of like, oh my god, Goodman's coming in, and you're going to get a Goodman type episode. I think it's really hard to figure out how to define that. So, Bill, am I off base here? Do you feel differently about Goodman?
Yeah, I think you're a little off base. I think this is one of those people, the 90s, obviously SNL are very up and down, but knowing that pretty much every year you were going to get Hanks, Goodman, Baldwin, Walken, Martin, like that was kind of a comfort to know. Yeah, bring in these movie stars that are going to host one time. That's fine. Get these TV stars once in a while. But you knew you had this like core group, and Goodman was a very, very important part of that. Now, the middle episodes, as you mentioned with the season 20, there's a few in there with Aykroyd where he's basically co-hosting. Isn't really given the credit for it, but he's in a lot more than Goodman is, not only in season 20, but I think in 21 or 22 as well.
It's 23 he's in, and then Mike
23.
Myers is the special guest in 22 that sort of helps him out.
Right. So, but and part of that is they're promoting Blues Brothers. They're rebranding Blues Brothers with Mighty Mac Blues. This is before Jim Belushi comes into the fold as Brother Z. So, they're promoting Blues Brothers 2000. They have a couple monologues that go right into a musical, which doesn't happen very much in the history of the show. And then, of course, they have the weekend update piece as well. But I think there is something, and I'm not sure that I can completely define it for you, but there is something about a John Goodman episode, almost like Buck Henry in a way, where it's not that there's this defining ultimate characteristic of him, but you knew a Goodman episode when you saw it. He was willing to play around with whatever they gave him, and he does. And I can't wait to get into some of these sketches that he's in.
Right. And with respect, I just push back because you just told me that there is a defining characteristic of Goodman, but you can't verbalize it. And I think that is exactly my point, is that I don't think anyone could tell me what a John Goodman episode is like. It's just good, man.
Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's it.
and I just wanted to add real quick that like one defining characteristic that I've noticed is that like with Melissa McCarthy, he's one of the hosts that doesn't, I may have said this already, he doesn't rely on too many specific recurring characters outside of maybe an impression he did once or twice. There's no really recurring John Goodman characters, but he does blend seamlessly into other recurring character sketches. Like you see, he played the church lady's mom. He was a cop who almost busted Wayne and Garth a couple of times, and yes, he was a friend of Bill Brasky, and that may be his only real character. But that's just the variety you get with a John Goodman episode. And he actually gave the anal retentive chef what for his comeuppance. But yeah, there's a variety of John Goodman's episodes. You're never really going to get the same thing twice or the same thing as the previous episode. And that's that's what made his episode so fun to go back and dig through and just pick out specific moments that were all just different from each other.
Yeah, and I respect that. And I think that may be why he is so good at hosting SNL, because what he brings to the show is just truly the ability to morph into what they need him to morph into, to fit into any sketch. You could add John Goodman to any sketch in SNL history, perhaps, and he is going to just be like a net positive on the sketch. And that's why he's at 7 here on this list. But for me, I don't think he takes over the show in the way that the rest of the top 10 we're going to talk about at the end of this list will. And that's what's interesting for me and why I may put him behind some others. Ike, I'd love to get your opinion overall on John Goodman at 7.
Oh man, John, when I think of Goodman, Well, when I think of SNL in the '90s period, I'm thinking Kevin Nealon, uh, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, and John Goodman. I feel like he fits into that mold in that era. And I always think of John Goodman as like that relative that you can't wait to come over because he's just gonna have you just eat whatever you want. You can stay up late and all that type of stuff. And I think John Goodman's one of our greatest character actors of all time. I find it shocking that no one has given him an Oscar yet. And the consistency is insane. I don't know what it is about the name John, but apparently John's like hosting. I think if your name is John, you're going to host every year, like every season, So it's and he did it while on Roseanne, which a lot of people forget. Roseanne was like one of the top shows of that time. Like this is like how Abbott Elementary or something is today. Like it was that popular of a show, and he still found time to host as many times as he did. Now, his 13th one, I remember it very, very well. I watched it live. He did what he could. Obviously, he was a lot older at the time, and they did what they could with him there. But after that was over, I was pretty much content with the fact that he's probably not going to host again, and that's more of his swan song. But he's got a lot of memories alone in Studio 8H, so I wouldn't complain at all of his legacy.
And I don't think, unless Hanks hosts a few more times, I don't think anyone's passing him right now for third all time. Like, I think it's really hard for people to host that many times. It's just the show is not produced in the way that you're going to get many 10-timers anymore. So for me, like I said, from a legacy perspective, absolutely off the chart stuff we get from John Goodman hosting 13 times and a record I don't think will ever be broken with the 11 seasons in a row. So these are huge things to consider when talking about ranking him. Casey, for you, let's talk about a couple of great John Goodman moments that you want to recommend to listeners who haven't gone and seen those Goodman episodes.
Well, I'm just gonna start going in chronological order here. His first one had the referee Pittman show, where it was like a polite press conference interview with just sports fans saying things like, is it more comfortable to have your head in your rear end or versus outside looking at the game, or are you totally legally blind, or do you have human excrement or animal excrement in your head? Just like things they would scream at the TV, but in a talk show setting. And the Mike Ditka Christmas special where he played Santa was fun. I'm just looking over my couple of pages of notes here. He played the bigger, older Elvis in that Natalie Cole sketch in season 17. I mean, he might have given Rob Schneider a run for his money as far as Elvis impersonations. Another recurring sketch he slid into well was there a cruise with Mike Myers as Linda Richmond. That was a nice format break from Coffee Talk and the Man Without a Shout and the Irish singers doing rock covers, the Plucky Ninjas, Captain Jim and Pedro, the Bulls, the Bears. He fit into that when Mike Myers left. Of course, Bill Brasky. He did a fine De Niro and Joe Pesci. He was Colette Reardon's pharmacist. He played Brando in Celebrity Jeopardy. He hosted the first episode after the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, and that led to his big political cameo role as Linda Tripp, who I think secretly recorded Monica Lewinsky's phone calls about Clinton because she was her friend. And yeah, a 10 Commandment sketch with Daryl Hammond as Bill Clinton. Like the original Snakes on a Plane, that was a sketch, but it was Cobras on a Plane. He was in that. He played William Ginsburg, her lawyer. His season 24 episode, I'd recommend that in its entirety because I feel like that was like peak Goodman in the Adam McKay era. That was like his best episode where they knew how to use him well.
I
And
agree.
he really, livened up a lot of the darker, crazier material that Adam McKay wanted to get out of his system, like the adult literacy program, Sean Mondavi Wines, gift wrap, Happy Smile Patrol, where if you haven't seen it, brace yourselves, because it's a very bright, happy, silly kid show where Goodman is dressed as a baby.
Don't spoil it though,
Okay.
because don't spoil it, because I think that's one of those sketches. There are people do need to go watch that one if they have not watched it before. But look up Happy Smile Patrol if you get a chance to. Yeah, but Casey, those are all some really good ones. I just also want to let Bill and Ike just name a couple from their resumes.
That's all I wanted to mention anyway.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, so many good ones here. Obviously, with hosting 13 times and being such a sponge, I think he's able to just naturally be in so many great sketches. For you, Bill Kenny, how did you feel about some of the best moments from his time, whether they're ones that Casey named already or ones that you have on your list?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff with Aykroyd, especially, I think that's kind of a blessing in disguise, because we do get a late show in the season 20 with Aykroyd's impeccable Tom Snyder. So we get to see that come back. We get to see Superfans, the Bear sketch, where he's playing Mike Myers' role, and he's gained a lot of weight over the last couple of years. And they actually have one of the better meta jokes that we've seen in SNL, where Farley says that SNL show has gotten real bad, has gotten worse. But that incorporates Dan as well, because we get an Irwin Mainway in the Superfans sketch. Obviously, the Bill Braskys, I mean, all-time classic for me. Probably a top 5 or 10 sketch of all time. Something I still quote today. Morning Latte, which is one of the better Sherry and Will pieces. He's playing the producer in that, and he eventually snaps and goes off on them. Bloater Brothers, which we talked about earlier on at the beginning of this, with one of Fallon's better characters and Parnell. He's playing a cop in that. He always plays a really good cop in all of these sketches. Little Sleuths with Amy and Seth, which is an underrated classic for those two before they were on Weekend Update. And I think there is some good moments in that last episode. It's obviously not as great. We do get the Sly and De Niro cameos and in the Three Wise Guys sketch, and then he's the drunker uncle on Weekend Update with our friend Bobby. So there's some good moments in all of these. This is pretty much the first time that we've been talking about somebody who's covered such a large swath of the show's history. We're going all the way from Phil and Jan all the way up to the Kristen Wiig era. So there's so much good stuff here, and happy to be able to talk about them here.
Yeah, and even past the Kristen Wiig era, right? Hosting season 39. So it's like, for me, it's probably, one of the craziest ones that we've had. I mean, Baldwin and Steve are probably the only ones that can top it in that case, truly. But yeah, it's just, and I guess Hanks, if you count the At Home episode, but yeah, it's just like, it's fascinating to think about how many cast members he's interacted with over the years. And from that 2013 episode, I mean, there are some really good moments. Like you said, I love him with Shallon, that great character that we get from the scene. And also he's in a Sheila Sauvage sketch with Kate. So, he does really that's the thing, is like, if I was working on Saturday Night Live and John Goodman was showing up this week, I'd be just so pumped and excited about it. I just really feel like he could just basically, it's probably one of the easiest weeks of the year, because he could really do anything. So, Ike, in your research back into John Goodman's episodes, are there any other moments that you would recommend to the listeners?
Oh, well, I always like going to the monologue. So I liked his first monologue. It's almost like, because I'm watching it, I guess it's like they're doing a low key. They got what was it, Victoria Jackson as Roseanne, and it's like there's something going on backstage, but then something happens, and then there's this awkward silence for like a minute, and then so I'm like, oh, that didn't go well, and then by the end he's like, oh, that never happened. This was a perfect show, and I'm like, dang it, John is too likable, man. And then so I like that one. The rerun monologue Casey alluded to earlier, where it's like is this a rerun? And then he's like, oh, you're probably confused because I've hosted a lot. Oh no, see, it's in the paper. See that this is a so them being meta like that, playing into the fact that he has been there a long time, that was fun. I like I think it was called American Underground or American Undercover, where it's Chris Kattan and Amy Poehler. They're like a trailer park couple, and then John is like the police person trying to break it up. And the line that stands out to me is Kattan's like, "My wife's in the stove." It's like it's probably not even that funny of a sketch, but me watching it, I'm just like, okay, so this is what we're doing. And then there's this I didn't even know this sketch existed. And I looked at its YouTube views, and I'm sure a lot of the fans don't know it exists either. There's this sketch. I'm gonna set up like this. It's like a family dinner. Mike Myers is there, and John Goodman is there. And Mike Myers is talking about, oh well, I just joined a new club, and then they're like, oh, that's great. Well, what's the club? Oh well, we're the Crips. What? I'm like, how have I never heard it? How have we never heard of this? Why is this like one of those those deep cuts? Why is no one ever talking about that sketch? Like that reveal is just like insane to me. Now, I did have a question about this whole Linda Tripp stuff because I'm like 4 years old when all this is going on. So I want to ask you all, is his Linda Tripp looked at fondly, or is it like how we look at Alec Baldwin as Trump, where it was just like, oh, here we go again with this? Because the sketch I saw was the one where it's him and Monica, and they're on the phone with each other, and they're both just scarfing down food. And Monica's like, oh, they called me fat the other day. And the whole sketch is just them scarfing down food. And I'm just like, is there something I'm missing? So I don't know if the impression was ever like looked fondly, or people just like, that he went too far with that one.
I think it was considered mean-spirited in hindsight, although Linda Tripp is not a good person, even though, RIP. But like they really had, this was, as Casey kind of alluded to, this is the first episode back after the scandal breaks, and it is the biggest thing on the planet. And they pretty much dedicate the entire episode to it. So I do wonder if they did bring him in because they knew he was going to do Linda Tripp, or if it was just kind of kismet that he ended up being there. And it is kind of interesting because this is only about 10 or 12 days after the scandal broke.
And it was a pretty big deal. Like I remember, going through these episodes, and I think at one, I'm trying to place like when this happened exactly, but there was an episode where he just like cameos by himself and does like Linda Tripp, but like as John Goodman on stage, like talking about how it's been like a while since we've seen it. Like it was a big cameo. The fact that they were able, like this wasn't something that was typically common then to like bring in an outsider to do a political impression. And the fact that like if you think about where the types of scandals that we deal with now are like absolutely batshit crazy compared to like this person at the White House, like sort of doing stuff with the president. Like that to me is like in retrospect like kind of hilarious. And the fact is that like Linda Tripp, as we alluded to, like was supposed to be Monica Lewinsky's friend, but is like recording their phone call and then using that tape as evidence against this increasing stuff that they're just building like thing after thing to like sort of go after Clinton, among all the other stuff that they're starting to eventually lead towards his impeachment. And I think that the writers had a field day with the idea of like trying to get Linda Tripp to catch Monica Lewinsky saying something. So they had the whole thing with like her brooch being very big, being this like flower that was like a secret recording device. And I just think that they were able to like really have fun with it. So to me, I think this was, again, I can understand the argument that it was mean-spirited, and they certainly like, played upon her weight and all of that stuff, but and her looks and everything. But I think that the idea of like what they were playing with at the time was like so benign compared to some of the things that people, go after people for today and all the scandals that are happening in the world, that it's almost looked as more fun to me. But again, it may be different if you were going through it on a day-to-day basis. Does that answer your question, Ike?
Yeah. That answers it. Yeah.
I mean, I just like to add to the Linda Tripp discussion.
Sure.
It's like, it's like the sketch John was talking about had him. He was there just to mention, well, Linda Tripp had lost weight. Maybe she got liposuction or got plastic surgery, so she looks totally different now. And he says, well, I'd like to introduce the next person to play her on Saturday Night Live, Miss Julia Roberts. And then Julia Roberts doesn't come out. And he's like, just kidding. I'm going to play her and I'm going to put on 20 more pounds. But it kind of makes, I could see it making people think at the time, it would make people wonder whether were they punching down on Linda Tripp for being a bad friend and a bad person and just a shameless opportunist, or were they just punching down on Linda Tripp because of her weight or her looks, because they're having a man player? Because it's the exact type of thing you would expect SNL to do in like 1998, 99. It's the only time they could have done it, because they couldn't get away with doing that today. I mean, they'd be, called out for being way too un-PC if they were going to do this now. But yeah, compared to like political cameos now, it's like we should be grateful that like we only got that like 4 times in the space of 1 year, rather than just 4 years worth of that, and like every week or every other week or every month. So yeah, it's kind of a gray area, but it'd be looked on less fondly now than it was at the time.
Right. Casey, sorry, I'm just going to mute you so we could just get that sound out of the way. The episode I was talking about, by the way, if you want to go back and you want to check it out for that sketch, that was from the first episode of the Millennium, the Jamie Foxx episode, where we get to see just very randomly a message from John Goodman on stage talking about the appearance with Linda Tripp. So let's talk about resume of John Goodman here at number 7. Obviously 13 times, again, only a couple people above him. 115 sketches that we do get from his time at the show, just like incredible stuff. So clearly legacy points all around, the impressions, the characters, being in so many recurring sketches. I don't know if we talked about Anal Retentive Chef, by the way, which is on screen, which is again one of my favorite Phil Hartman characters, and that edition of that sketch, so fantastic from the first time that Goodman hosts, and you got to see how great of a host he is. 7.62 SPE, so a little bit below average there, but still, like I said, the legacy of Goodman, fantastic. Can he work with multiple casts? Definitely, as we got to see him host year after year. So for me, well-deserved spot for John Goodman at number 7. Though you may be asking, like I said, to start this discussion, why he isn't at number 3 for hosting the third most amount of times in SNL history. And to me, there are just some hosts above him that we'll talk about that I think had more of an impact on, making their episodes so fantastic versus, just the way the Goodman falls into the process. Bill Kenny, for you, final thoughts on John Goodman here at 7.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I think most of us who are big fans of the show kind of know some of the people who are going to be coming up in the last 2 weeks here. And it will be interesting to see, you focused in on the brands that Goodman has, John. And I do wonder if some of the other people who have hosted more than Goodman actually have a brand. And I'm sure you'll have your case to make for that. But it's such an interesting trajectory. As you said, this is one of those, take a baseball statistic from the 80s that can't happen. Complete games. You're not going to get this again. You're not going to get 11 seasons in a row. I think there might have been like this outside feeling of hope that Mulaney would do that after he hosted 5 in a row very quickly. But it's not going to happen. So that, along with being able to see all the things he was able to do on the show, seamlessly fitting in with, multiple casts over 30 years, is no small feat. So I think this is a good placement for him. I think I might have had him a little bit higher, but we'll see as we go along here.
Bill, do you see him popping up in 50? Like, where would you envision Goodman coming there?
Well, I think with the 40, we only saw him in the audience, right? So he did have that moment in the Q&A where he talked about how many times he had hosted. I think he'll be there. I'm sure they'll try to honor him in some way. It's highly unlikely that he'll host. I mean, he's got to be approaching 75, 80, somewhere around there. I mean, he is still on the Roseanne reboot, so who knows? But yeah, I think he'll be at the 50 for sure.
Yeah, he's actually 72 right now.
Okay.
And he He did recently pop up on SNL, going back, I'd say 6 years about, when he played Rex Tillerson, which I guess nobody remembers who that is. But yes, there you go. That is John Goodman at 7. Casey, any final thoughts here?
Well, first of all, I'm glad I got to put on my best Dan Connor red flannel shirt to talk about John Goodman. And yeah, my mom even watches the Connors Todays, and that's a big hit. It's still going after a few years. And yeah, I mean, one part, one more Mount Rushmore type thing about John Goodman is that, I mean, the fact that he was a Blues Brother at one point on the show is a point for him, and that he's changed something about the show's legacy going back. I mean, I'd love to find out how Dan Aykroyd picked John Goodman out of all people at one point to sing with him, and maybe I'll check out the Blues Brothers interview that Bill did when I get a chance. And it's I also think, I wonder what Aykroyd had against just actually really hosting up until 2003 or so. But yeah, John Goodman's definitely deserving in his spot on this list.
Ike, for you, final thoughts on John Goodman here at 7? Oh, sorry, Ike. Let me just take that one more time. Ike, final thoughts here on John Goodman here at 7?
Oh, am I coming in now?
Yeah, you're good, buddy. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the best hosts of all time. Everything you guys said is valid. This, of the 3 hosts we talked about tonight, this is the one where I can't really answer if he'll be at the 50th. You would assume he would. I'm pretty sure he will. As far as what role, I'm not entirely sure. I think it depends on him and what he's, comfortable of doing, at his age. We had, Christopher Walken just introduced Kanye West at the 40th. So, and he's one of the best hosts ever. So it's like, who knows? As far as hosting, I think that's very unlikely, but I think it's the last season of the Connors this year. So you never know. Stranger things have happened, but if he ends up hosting, I'll welcome it with open arms.
Yes, sir. All right. That does it for John Goodman here at 7. Obviously, a legendary host. We're going to talk about some legendary people coming up over the next couple of weeks. Before we wrap up our show tonight, we have our final segment where we will talk about my list, Bill's list, and the list so far, and talk about where we placed these people. So, Bill, I'll have you go first and tell Casey and Ike why you placed your hosts where they are tonight, and we'll get their vote on which list is better. So here we go up on screen. So, Bill Kenny, for you, let's talk about where you put Melissa McCarthy, John Mulaney, and John Goodman.
So starting with my top 10, I have Eddie at 10, Adam Driver at 9. I slotted Melissa in here at 8, had her right behind ScarJo. After talking it through tonight, I might have to put her a little bit higher. They're neck and neck as far as their appearances and their hosting. So as I said, 7 is still ScarJo, Bill Murray at 6, Kristen at 5. I've got Will Ferrell at 4. I put Mulaney here at number 3, and Goodman at 2. Still have Buck at number 1. Goodman and Mulaney, 2 all-time classic hosts. Goodman's swath of the show, as we've discussed, is legendary, and Mulaney is the best modern day host for sure. So this feels like the right spot for them.
Yeah, those are some good points. For me right now, my top 10 is I got John Hamm at 10, Eddie at 9, Adam Driver at 8, Kristen Wiig is at 7. I have John Mulaney here at 6. I mean, again, Mulaney's so great, does a lot of amazing things. 5 seasons in a row, only in one era, sort of lowers him down here for me compared to some of the people above him. But if he ends up like just outside the top 10 for me, I think that's a very reasonable spot to put him. Nothing against Mulaney, but that's where I do have him. I do have him right now behind Scarlett Johansson, who I know I have a little bit higher than Bill right now, but I still think she's so great and totally underrated as a host. And the fact that we've seen her in these different eras made the difference for me. Will Ferrell has some huge moments on the show. I think you can argue that Mulaney has too with those 5 Timers Club Club and the musicals, but I think Will Ferrell coming back, being that former cast member who just makes such an impact every time he's back, for me, still has him in my top 5. I got Melissa McCarthy at 3. Like I said, potentially the greatest woman to ever host the show. Just so great every time she's there. Truly feels like she could be that cast member. So for me, I do have her at 3 right now. And I think that, again, underrated, and we need to have her back. Goodman, I do have it too, despite what I said about, him, sort of feeling like he just blends into the show almost too well. The fact that he's hosted 13 times, that he's so important to the story of Saturday Night Live, I cannot not have him at 2 on my list. But I do have him behind Buck Henry for now, where I do feel like Buck is still the greatest host that we talked about here. So important to the original era of the show, hosted 10 times as well. So you can compare that to Goodman. But I do think that Buck makes more of an impact on his episodes versus Goodman does on his. So for me, that's why I have Buck at 1 right now. So Casey, let me start with you. Looking at these 2 lists that we have here between mine and Bill's, how are you feeling about them? Do you want to give a point to either one?
Looking over your whole list, I feel they're both, very similar, so it's hard to make a distinction. But I've been following this countdown pretty closely these last few weeks, and I was leaning a bit more toward Bill, but having binged pretty much all Melissa's McCarthy's episodes really recently, I feel like John gave her a more deserving spot on this list. So I think John gave Melissa more of a fair shake. So I'm gonna go with John's list on this.
Thanks. All right, Casey, thank you for that. Ike, what about you? How are you feeling about one list versus another?
Well, like Casey said, you guys' lists are pretty similar, but if you had to make me make a decision right now, I'm gonna say Bill, only because he got Jim Carrey a little bit higher than you do, John, and I consider like Jim's second monologue like pretty much one of my favorite monologues. It's just so like it's almost like unscripted but scripted. It's just insane. So just off that alone, I'm gonna go with Bill.
Yeah, Bill has Jim Carrey at 16. I have him at 19, but that was good enough for Ike to give the point to Bill this week. So we it's a wash. I call it 1-1 here for this week, but it's been a lot of fun getting to talk about these 3 hosts with you. Thank you all so much for joining us on the show this week. So next week we have coming up 6, 5, and 4. So really getting into it in the penultimate week of this countdown. I'm very excited to be back next Monday night for that. Before we get there, we have 2 more shows coming up here on the SNN. So last week we released our interviews from the Blues Brothers Con. We do have another interview coming out this Thursday night, and that would be with former SNL cast member Mary Gross, who joined us for an episode of SNL Stories. So I'm looking forward to chatting with Mary. So we'll release that on Thursday. If you're wondering where season 11 is of everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live, our series where we're going back and looking at all of the old seasons and recapping them for you, about 15 to 20 minutes an episode, that will be back the following Thursday, September 12th, I believe. So 10 days from now. On Wednesday night of this week, before we get to the Mary Gross interview, we do have a very fun draft podcast. It's been a while since we've done a draft, so we will be drafting cast alumni who may appear in the 50th season of the show. We're going to give out points for if an SNL alumni hosts the show, if they appear as a cameo, or if they appear at the 50th anniversary. So we're going to be drafting that. That will be out on Wednesday night, and that will be very fun. So I'm looking forward to releasing that for all of you. Bill Kenny, thank you so much for joining us. Such a great time to be with you as we head into September and season 50 on the way. So anything you would like to plug for the listeners?
Yeah, what a long and winding road this has been, John. I can't believe we only have 2 weeks left of this thing we started in June. It's been so much fun. Great talk tonight. And if you haven't, please go back and watch the Blues Brother Convention coverage from James Stevens and I. Had such a great time getting to talk to all those people. So see me here next Monday.
Thanks so much, Bill. Casey, thank you for joining us tonight. Always appreciate your great commentary. Anything that you would like to plug to the listeners?
It's always a pleasure, but nothing much to plug. You can still follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky, and I do plan to start the blog back up again and review season 50 in real time. So if you're follow me anywhere, those places on Discord that I mentioned, that you'll see those reviews once I start doing them. And yeah, just getting geared up for season 50, and can't wait to see that Mary Gross interview, or check out the Blues Brothers interview Bill Kenny did. And yeah, that's what's going on with me.
Thanks, Casey. And Ike, thank you so much for joining us. So much fun to get to talk to you on the show tonight. So anything you would like to say as we say goodbye this evening?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at Ballistic Ike Moore. I'll be in all these chat rooms going into season 50. You know, I don't know what chaos awaits for us, but I cannot wait to see it, you know.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ike. And if you liked getting to hear from people like Casey and Ike, and you want to join us on one of these shows, you always can by signing up for one of the shows at patreon.com/the SNL Network. If you want to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a show, please do so on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And you can also follow us on social media at the SNL Network on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X to never miss any of the content that we are putting out there. Thank you so much to latenighter.com for being our presenting partner for the show tonight. Thanks to Bill and Ike and Casey for joining us and doing all the great research on the hosts we have revealed, and everybody in the chat for hanging out with us on this long weekend Labor Day Monday. My name is John Schneider from the Saturday Night Network, and we will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.